Okay. So, okay, we're live. Let me see. Right, let me just check myself on here.
Okay, I think, are we on live now? I think we are.
Hello?
Yeah.
Right, okay. It seems to be that
your camera's off center.
I seem to be, yeah, just a minute. Hello, yes. Yeah. Again, I moved, I think. 1 second. Can you just give me 1 second, please?
Yeah.
Just give me 1 second. Okay. So now, PC to discover the pin. Okay. Right. I've just changed the network settings because my network settings are a bit slow. So I suppose I need to move this way. Right. Okay. So if anybody out there can hear me, can you please let me know? Can you please in the chat? Can you please hello, Anas? Can you hear me, Anas? Hello.
And I presume you can hear me as well.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see. My system seems a bit slow at the moment. I can hear you through StreamYard, but not through the actual. Okay, right. You can hear me. Okay, I think we can proceed. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Allah. Right. All right. Let me turn off that off. Okay, so people can hear me. Okay, right. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And shalom and good evening to our Rabbi here, who's my special guest for the day. Well, for the night, for the evening, because we're both at the same time here, 8 o'clock in the evening. it gives me great pleasure to invite somebody like you on my channel, especially being the launch of my channel, the first time I'm starting my YouTube channel. And I know I've been communicating with you for a while now. I've been emailing you and everything. I've been watching your shows for almost 2 years and over now. And some of the stuff that I find is incredible. So the reason I wanted to invite you online, I know you're not an Islamic scholar, so I'm not going to ask you anything Islamic. What we will deal with is mainly things that are educational, that will help the brothers and sisters out there that have issues with, like, you know, answering Christians or whatever, because we do have a lot of attacks on our faith, both of our faiths actually, because we do share a lot in common. And a lot of the Christians don't know that we share a lot in common, because I suppose maybe they don't read the Bibles. So the fact that they don't read the Bibles, you know, a lot of them kind of think, well, you know, what they're attacking us on, like, you know, it's not in their books, kind of thing. So the reason I called you as well here is that, like, you know, we can have a good discussion, you know. And I know you're very. I mean, I've listened to your debates, I've listened to your lectures and everything, and it gives me great pleasure to invite you on.
Well,
So,
alaikum salam. And thank you very much. And it's true, your point. That is, if you don't read the book, but rather read the internet, if you don't read the holy book, but rather you watch some news reporting, then a person might think that Muslims and Jews are spiritually far apart. But as it turns out,
yeah,
we worship the one God of Abraham and Isaac
exactly.
and Jacob. And it's people are not, unfortunately, reading the original literature. And I want to encourage people to do. So thank you for having me on your maiden program.
It's always been a great pleasure for me, because, you know, every week when I listen to William Hall's Tanakh talk and everything, sometimes I'm at work and I'm not actually watching it. I put my phone on and put it in my bag and put my headphones on, and I'm just listening because I'm learning something at least, you know. So for me, it would have always been a great pleasure when I start a YouTube channel to invite you on and have a discussion, basically. You must excuse my eyes. I think I mentioned to you that I've got a problem with my eyes at the moment. I think it's windy here, and I ended up getting bloodshot eyes. So anyway, what I was going to say is, yes, I have an announcement to make as well. For the people who are listening, people who are watching, and people who are subscribing to my channel, it's been a while now. I've been mentioning about this, that for educational purposes, I've got a package with about 9 websites in there, and I'm offering it to the people who want to go into blogging, who want to, like, you know, they've done research, and if they're going to pay WordPress some $33 a month, I'm offering it for free. Yeah, for people who would subscribe to my channel, I will. It's a contest, basically. I will announce the contest more later on. What you'd need to do is go into my blog, read some of my articles there, and then post me the best articles that you think is the best. And then what you do is, I would like you, the people who like to blog, the people who like to write, the people who I've written a book recently called Crucify Him, Crucify Whom, which hasn't been released yet. I'm going to be releasing it soon. And I'll be releasing that on my blog as well, little by little. So I would advise the people who have subscribed to my channel to read my blog, and then you write your best article and send me. And that article, I will post it on my blog. And then around July, August, after Ramadan, I will be hosting a competition where I'll be offering 3 free websites, hosting for free for all your life. So you can post your blogs, you can do anything on there. I've mentioned that to a lot of my friends and everything, and they don't seem to be. We haven't come across people who are very much interested in it at the moment. But hopefully through this channel, I can get people to take part in the competition and then send me their articles, and then from then we can actually, you know, I can hold that competition. So anyway, let's get on. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question from the beginning. The first question I wanted to ask you: why Indonesia?
Wow, that's a great question. So as it turns out, I served as rabbi of Indonesia for 5 years, and essentially I was the first rabbi to serve Indonesia since World War II, since Indonesia became an independent country. For an odd reason, Indonesia, for a very long time, did not recognize Judaism officially as one of the 6 religions um, that it accepts on the ID card. It's very odd because here you have the largest Muslim country in the world that did not recognize the religion that the Quran recognizes. And it was an unfortunate situation, but Indonesia realized that this was a mistake in recent years. And what happened is that Jewish people who were living in Indonesia, when it became independent, they had to choose one of 6 religions. Shia and Sunni were regarded as different, but they had to choose a religion. You weren't compelled to practice that religion, but you had to choose something. And many Jews who lived in different islands chose Christianity. They didn't go to church. They didn't belong to any nothing, but they chose that as one of the 6 options. The consequences for that was that their children and grandchildren had to go to a public school that's a Christian public school. If you're an American, you wouldn't understand this, but in the Far East, it's not unusual for the public schools to be assigned to people based on their religious beliefs. So as a result of that, in short, many Jews had over the generations become Christians. And I became aware of this.
Sorry to interrupt you, but were there any Jews in Indonesia?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
I would have thought that it was a country like, I wouldn't have ever thought of there having been any Jews, especially in Indonesia, because earlier on they were not even Muslims. I mean, I have friends of mine who are in Indonesian, and we've spoken a lot and everything. Islam came to them. Yeah, they came from different tribes, different whatever. But I've never actually thought that there were what you call Jews in Indonesia. People, I mean, you were doing the job supposedly what Jesus was supposed to be doing, calling back the lost tribe to Judaism. People who were lost, you were bringing back to. This is what I understand when I listen to your talks and everything. When you were in Indonesia, you were calling the people back to the faith. Right? And I'd never thought that there were actually any Jews who had left the faith in Indonesia.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is that Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. Right. After China, India, and the United States, Indonesia is number 4. So it's such an enormous country of nearly 300 million people that 20,000 people can get lost very easily. This is not like Kuwait, or Qatar, which are small countries. This is an enormous country with 17,000 islands. So there were many Jewish people there who were there from the Dutch colony, because that's what Indonesia was.
That's something new to me. That's something new to me. That's
new to a lot of people. But what's exciting is that there are many Jewish people who really wanted to understand about their faith and heritage. And I came there to help them understand what Judaism believes, and it helped them return back to the Jewish faith. And they asked me to stay on as their rabbi, and I was very excited to do that. And I had a very, very good relationship with the Muslim communities all over. I lectured in mosques all over Indonesia. And in fact, in our synagogue, many, many Muslims would come to study Torah and be a part of it. It was a very, very exciting experience.
That's the other thing I was going to ask you. Yeah. Did you feel more comfortable being among the Muslims there, or being, say, in a Christian environment? I mean, we share a lot in common. Judaism and Christian and Islam, we share a lot in common. We can eat your meat, we can marry your women or whatever, and many of our laws also, there's commonalities. But Christianity of today, I'm talking about, not ancient Christianity, but Christianity of today has kind of divorced itself from Judaism. So being in an environment like Indonesia, and then comparing it to being in a country that doesn't, follow these laws and everything, how would you compare it, basically?
It's not even comparable. I've never experienced anti-Semitism in Indonesia, and I've never experienced anti-Semitism in any Muslim country, and I've been to many. And there is not a majority Christian country where I didn't experience anti-Semitism. It's night and day. I mean, in Indonesia, I was treated with the greatest respect, and moreover, the Muslim community has for many years been very closely connected to me. My really closest friends in the world are, not all of them, many of them are Muslims, and Muslims also use Jewish apologetics because our apologetics, which is very important because we're both under attack from Christians, from the church, our apologetics, our defense of Tawheed, of a Unitarian true monotheism instead of a fake monotheism of the church is the same. And
Right.
therefore, I can't even begin to, I don't have the vocabulary that's adequate to describe how deeply connected I was to the Muslim community. We'd go out and give tzedakah, we'd feed the poor, Muslims and I together. And
You see, a lot of Christians don't
it's
seem
on
to
YouTube.
understand.
No,
A
they have
lot
no
of Christians
clue.
don't seem to understand that even in the past, when there was the Islamic State, Jews lived very comfortably under Muslims, under Muslim rule, and we didn't have any problems. I mean, what's happening today is political, but we always lived in harmony. My wife is from Yemen, and I know that Yemen, there were Jews there that lived in harmony with them, with the Muslims, and also you have Muslim Spain, where Jews lived in harmony, and that's why I was thinking there must have been some contrast there when you were in Indonesia, kind of thing.
I'll say this to you, and I never said this publicly, and I'll say it now. When I was in Indonesia, whether I was in Jakarta, Surabaya, I was in Papua, it made no difference. If I walk around and there are Muslims there, I'm fine. The only thing that makes me nervous is when I see a white guy. And what I mean by that is when I see someone who you can tell is an expat, who you can tell is somewhere in Europe, and he's working in Indonesia. He's the one who gives me that second look and go, whoa, what's the Jew doing here? He doesn't say it. No one ever said anything. But you can tell. That means the Muslims are never, only the greatest respect, really. And I was on TV quite a bit in Indonesia, so many Muslims recognized me. They'd come over to me. There was a special way they would show me respect. But truthfully, the only people who I knew had possibly some antipathy towards me were the Christian Europeans who happened to be in Indonesia working there, and you have the expats just like you have in your countries. I was treated with the greatest respect.
Good. Okay, another question to you now. Judaism, the term Judaism, I mean, would God call a religion after Judah, after Israel, which is the son of Jacob? I mean, where does that term Judaism actually come from? I mean, you call yourself Jews, and the religion that you practice. I'm just making a parallel here. I'm not asking you to answer the Islamic side of it, but Allah in the Quran tells us that today I have perfected your religion and I've called it Islam. In Judaism, is there anywhere where this term is used? Judaism and you are Jews. I mean, I haven't come across, for example, Moses mentioning this. I haven't come across, or Israelites or whatever. Was there a name that the Jews were called prior to that were recognized prior to that? Because Judah only came after, so.
Right. So let me explain it. So as it turns out, in the Quran, the Jews are called Jews, al Yahud, and also called Banu Yisrael.
Yes.
So as it turns out, the Quran recognizes that designation not
Hmm.
just as people who are from the tribe of Judah, but a name largely to describe any of the Banu Yisrael. And you have in the Quran, I don't need to tell you this, you have both terms are used. One is used more frequently than the other in the Meccan surahs and others, and those that came out of that were revealed in Medina. So we see actually that this term is in the Quran itself. As it turns out, this term referring to the Banu Yisrael, the Bnei Yisrael, as Jews is in Tanakh, is in the Jewish Bible as well, even people who are not from the tribe of Judah. I am not from the tribe of Judah. I am a descendant of Aaron, Aharon, the prophet of blessed memory. He's my great great grandfather. I'm a priest. So technically, you could say I'm an Israelite. But we find in Tanakh that, in fact, people of all the tribes were called after Judah. And this is a prophecy that Jacob, of blessed memory, gave the son, Judah, in Genesis chapter 49, verse 8. At the end of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Torah, Jacob is on his deathbed and he's blessing all his children. Judah receives very unique blessings, and he says that all your children will praise you, all your children, all your brothers will name themselves and be praised by you. So it's based on that, for example, Mordechai, we find in the book of Esther, was from the tribe of Benjamin. And we go to the book of Esther, chapter 2, verse 15. We're told that he's from the tribe of Benjamin, but is it Ish Yehudi? The same word is in the Quran. So you
Hmm.
have, so it is odd, but it's based on an ancient prophecy that goes back about
Right.
30, let's say 3,600
Okay.
years, that Judah is unique. And in fact, who comes from Judah? King David of blessed memory and many others. So it's a very unique
Okay.
tribe. That's why the
Right.
designation is
Now
there.
you've got some Jewish scholars who actually mention that Islam is the oldest religion that exists. I don't know whether you know about this, but there are some Jewish scholars who has mentioned that they were known as Ger Toshav, the people who are like righteous Gentiles who are non-idolaters and everything, and we're also known as what do you call it, Benai Noach as well among the Jews. So, do you agree with that as well? Are you in that? Because I think he's a Hasidic Jew. I think. Do you adhere to that as well? That Islam was the oldest of the religions, and there were people who were not actually Jews, but we were actually even. They say were taking part in some of the rituals that the Jews were taking part in. So, can you tell us a
Right.
bit about that?
So,
About the
let
Muslims being Banai Noach?
So we need to sort of unpack that a little bit, because what's happening is that terms could be easily conflated. Now, as it turns out, it's better for a Muslim scholar to address this. But the
No,
question
I'm
is,
I'm asking I'm asking from the
yes,
from the
yes, yes,
Jewish
I'm
side
going
of
to
it.
do that.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So the word Islam uh, would is means somebody who submits to the true God of Abraham. So yes, Adam was a prophet of blessed memory. Noah was a prophet of blessed memory. Abraham was a prophet of blessed memory, and so on. And therefore, we would say that all of these people were the greatest human beings that ever lived, and all submitted to God. So we might say this in a really simple way, that all of them um, practice Islam, but with a lowercase I. That means they all submitted themselves to the one true God. So the answer is, of course. I mean, that is core to the Jewish faith, is to submit ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Holy One, blessed be His name. But you have to be very careful with language, because once you just capitalize it, things change dramatically. So the history of the Jewish people is in the Quran. I don't need to tell you that. Almost with one exception, every event in the Torah about Moses is in the Quran. There's only one event in the Quran that we don't find in the Torah, and that's in Surah Al-Kahf. But so in all those cases, they're practicing a submission to the one true God. But if we say Islam with a capital I, so that of course begins in a conventional sense in the 7th century. So
That is what I mentioned, where Allah says, "Today I have perfected your religion, and I've called it Islam." But Islam was there in a different name, in much earlier. Like I mentioned earlier on, we've even been called Banai Noah, Ger Toshav, and
right.
I think the scholar mentioned another Irat Shamimi or something like this. So, because we were non-idolatrous Gentiles compared to what the Christians are today. You see, so that term Islam came to finalize the religion, to finalize that message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Right.
You
So
see,
that's why we have to be, just
right,
careful on terms. This is nobody's fault, but as it
right,
turns out, the holy books use terms in a way, and there are idioms that are not conventional today. And it's not unusual for Christians to exploit these very important features and therefore make points that are completely ridiculous. You have to be familiar with the terms and understand their application.
right. Okay, I have another question for you. Is it right to say that Musa alayhi salam, Moshe, Vinu, actually performed Hajj? Because in the Bible it mentioned the Hajj in the Bible, and you got one of your scholars, Avi Lipkin, who actually talks about that in his book. I don't know whether you share the same thoughts as him, but he's got a book called Return to Mecca. I don't agree 100% with what he says, because he claims that then if Moses has performed the Hajj, then that means that Mecca belongs to the Jews. But according to his book, he said that you were the phylacterer, is that the way to pronounce it?
Yeah, but let me just
Yeah.
say this. I'm
So
just not.
can I just
I'm
carry on?
not.
Can I just carry on?
Yeah,
He said that
yeah.
to change from the pyramid system to the cube system. This is what he talks about, and he said that according to his belief, I think he's a Messianic Jew, or I don't know exactly, but I've read his book and I've listened to his interview, and he says 100%. Musa alayhi salam, because he lived in Arabia, and his grandfather was Jethro, yeah, and he said that 100% that they performed the Hajj, and the Hajj is in the Bible. If you translate it into obviously the Bible today that they are reading is in English, so now obviously the Christians will not see that word. I've had a lot of discussions with Christians, and they could bang their heads on against the wall until they become blue, and will tell me that the word is not in there. But when you read it in Hebrew, it is there. Circumambulation is in the Bible as well. That in the Talmud they explain them the word circumambulation. So this issue of Moses having performed Hajj, what is your take on that? From your side, and not
So
Islamically.
right. No. So I'm just not. I'm not familiar with that at all. I've never encountered that. So I just
Ah,
have. Uh, I just have
okay.
to. I tell you, I've never heard of that. I've never read anything by Avi, so I have no clue. Not
Right. He
familiar
seems
with
to
it.
be adamant that this is he said that there is some archaeological proof, and he mentioned that Moses donned the phylactery, and the however many people that were with him, they performed the Hajj, and where he was, he mentioned the location where they crossed, and that brought them to Mecca or something. So you haven't read that, yeah? You know nothing about
There's
that.
so many. Let me just say this: there's so many theories on where Moses would have crossed, and we can go into that and what is the evidence for it. But in truth, there's just many theories about this. There's a theory that in fact Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia rather
That's
than the
yes.
Sinai Peninsula.
That's what he
Uh,
mentions.
Right. There are theories about that. It's an area that is a completely restricted zone. People have done studies of this, but it's limited because people don't have access to go there. Even if you got a visa and went to Saudi Arabia, you would not be able to access this mountain. So I want to just say this to you. For Jewish people, who are religious, I'm not talking about Jewish people who are not loyal to God, But Jews who are loyal to Hashem love the Torah very, very much and consider the prophets of God to be the greatest men and women that ever lived, the greatest people that ever lived. And it is our duty to follow their guidance, and two, to emulate them. That's how Jews live. We consider Moses to have had the greatest level of revelation. His revelation was directly from God in a way that's completely unique. So I want to just say this so your viewers understand the way religious Jews think. We really don't think about monuments very much, or where exactly was Mount Sinai, or how did Abraham. It's not that it's certainly interesting, and I have videos on this where I discuss things because it goes into oceanography and so on. But in truth, religious Jews never think about this stuff. Really don't.
No, my
It
point
may
is mainly on the Hajj issue, because the thing is,
right.
I know in the Bible the word Hajj is there, and I know the word circumambulation when I checked it in the Talmud, because I had a discussion with a lady before, and she mentioned that Muslims worship the Kaaba, Muslims do circumambulation around the Kaaba, and I said to her, no, the prophets of old did the same thing, and it is in the Bible. Show it to me, she said. I showed it to her. She didn't see that verse because she doesn't trust the rabbis. Oh, I don't trust the rabbis and whatever. But that word is in the Talmud, and it's the Hajj itself is called pilgrimage. Yeah,
Right.
and the word circumambulation is there.
So let's do that. So let me
Mhm.
just do the text in the Bible. It's in the
Right.
text. What you're talking about is in the book of Exodus, chapter 12, verse 14. The text says, "V'hoya hayoim hazel lechem lezikaron." This is talking about the Passover. V'chagoisem oisoi chag lashem, and you shall observe this holiday as a festival to God, l'doirei sechem, to all future generations, chukas olam tichaguhu, and you should, it should be a everlasting, um, an everlasting celebration, an everlasting ordinance, forever and ever. Okay, and this is not the only place, but Exodus 12 is really important because it's about the Passover, and it's about the Jewish people must go to the place that God has signed. Turns out that's in Jerusalem, and that's where the Rabbi was eventually founded by King David. So now, if a person, like in Arabic, as in Hebrew, the G sound could be exchanged for a J sound. They could be interchangeable.
Egyptians.
Right. So as it turns out, exactly. So Egyptian Arabic is, like the word for a camel. So the Hebrew and Arabic word for a camel is the same word, but an Egyptian will pronounce that word in Arabic, and a Muslim from
just
Kuwait
like
will
my
pronounce.
name, just like my name actually.
Right. So
Egyptians
let
will
me
call me
just.
Jamal instead of Jamal.
So what I was right. So what I would say. So it's the same exact Hebrew word. The languages are so close that Indonesian is not a Semitic language, but there's a lot of Arabic in the language just because it's a Muslim country. And I always know the Arabic words because the words in Indonesian that are Hebrew, I know come from the Arabic. It just makes that much sense. The point is the following. So if someone looks at this passage, you're not going to see it, but there are Muslims who think that this text refers to Hajj, and that's if people, it's something of faith. Now,
But
I,
doesn't it mean pilgrimage? In some translations, it says
yes, it
pilgrimage.
does. It does. It sure does. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, that's right.
And
Chagoisem, that means it's a time. That's correct. That you should keep the feast and you should go for all generations. That's correct. Chukas olam tichaguhu, and it's for an ordinance for you to. It's a very strange idiom for you to go up and to have a pilgrimage, which the Jews observed throughout history on the major festivals. Passover, which just passed, Shavuot, the festival of tabernacles, and on those occasions, Jews did go up on their pilgrimage. So there are some there are some people who have said that about the text, that they believe that this text is a veiled reference to Hajj, and that's it's fine. It's not the
Okay,
plain text, but it's
what about the
well
word
written.
circumambulation? Like I said to you, I spent hours chatting to one lady on Facebook, and she just wouldn't understand. She just wouldn't know. And when I said to her, I gave her the Talmud explanation that the word Hajj had to do with the pilgrimage, and also the word circumambulation was in the book. And she said, I don't believe it. She said, because obviously the Christians have translated the Bible, and that word circumambulation is not showing there, but the actual word is in there. And I understand that the prophets of old used to do circumambulation. They used to do circumambulation around the temple, and
They
so the
did,
act was
in
actually
fact.
there. Yeah.
Yes, so it was a required act that when a person entered into the temple in Jerusalem, I live I live like a half a kilometer. I could see the Temple Mount from where I live, literally. So it is true that when someone entered into the temple, they were never permitted to leave the temple through the door that they entered. You were never allowed to just walk in and walk out. Rather, you had to go through circumnavigate the temple and then come leave through another exit. The only exception was the king was permitted to do that. So therefore, it created an encirclement that was taking place. There was an entry and an exit. The purpose of it in the Talmud is so that people don't think that they can just walk into a holy place and you have, oh, looks interesting to me, and then walk out. In fact, in Jewish law, a Jew not just walk into a synagogue and have a conversation. You have to pray. You can't sit. A holy place is a place of prayer, and it's not a place to discuss business. So you've got to pray in a holy place, even if it's not one of the designated for Jews. It's 3 times a day. So yes, there was a circumnavigation that went on in the temple as part of the rite, meaning the practice of religious Jews going back to time immemorial.
Okay, and also the issue of the Kaaba, the black stone. Jacob had a stone as well, and he called it Bet El, according to what
Mhm.
I understand. And that was used as of some sort of a symbol as well. But because what Muslims get accused today is Muslims worship the black stone, and these Christians have not actually read. When a Christian tells you yes, he's read the Bible, he means he's read the New Testament. He hasn't read the Old Testament. If he had read the Old Testament, he would have seen these things that they're accusing us of. They would have seen it in the Old Testament, basically.
Right. So, yeah. So when Jacob set up an altar, first there are different places where Jacob set up a memorial. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but
Um,
Jacob did that in Bethel. That's correct, in Bethel.
yes, yeah.
Bethel
Mhm.
is located just north of Jerusalem. It's about a 30-minute drive. It's in the part of Benjamin. We actually know where it is, and people go there to visit the area. So yeah, he did erect that memorial after he had this ecstatic dream of seeing the ladder, the sulam, that went from the ground to the heaven, connecting heaven and earth together. That's correct. He did do that.
Right.
So that wouldn't be the Kaaba that's in Saudi Arabia. In that case, we're told that is in the land in Eretz Israel. Yeah. So he
Right.
also sets up
But
an
is
altar
it is it
in.
is it not that because you don't have a temple anymore, because the temple is not there? Is it not because of that the Kaaba, the direction was changed? I mean, this is what I would think of it. You don't have a temple anymore, so where do you turn to? You don't have a
Uh,
direction to turn.
so we have
Yeah.
a prophet that tells us exactly what to do, and King Solomon of
Uh-huh.
blessed memory,
Right.
in chapter
Hmm.
8 of First Kings, tells us that in fact, when you're not in the land or you don't have a caliphate, I mean a Jewish caliphate, when you're not in the land and you're in the land of your enemies, you've been exiled. What do you do? And in his inauguration of the first temple, he says you're to turn your face to this place. And is based on this passage that Jewish people face the Temple Mount, we face the foundation stone when we pray. We're always facing that. When I was in Indonesia, I'd be facing due east. In fact, due west. In fact, and strangely, in Indonesia, every hotel room has an arrow telling you which way Mecca is. It's just the law in Indonesia. But as it turns out, if you draw a straight line from Indonesia to Jerusalem, it passes basically right through Mecca. So
Right.
we face the Temple Mount when we pray, regardless of where we are right now. So for me, the Temple Mount's right there,
Yeah.
right out in the
So
middle of it.
exactly. So they. I
But
mean,
it was
obviously
always
Christians
that
to some
way.
extent.
But it was always that way, whether a
Uh huh.
temple stood or didn't stand. Another
Right. Okay.
example is Daniel of blessed memory in
Mm-hmm.
chapter 6.
Right.
Daniel, there was a conspiracy against him to try to get him killed because he was a very high officer, and this is during Darius the Mede. And the point was, it says explicitly in the text that Daniel stood up against this law that you were only allowed to pray to the king, and he publicly prayed towards Jerusalem. So it's in the text.
Right.
And there was
Right.
no
Okay.
temple at the time of Daniel.
Right. But no, my point is the fact that we keep getting accused of, like, a lot of Christians don't know that the even the prophets of old were actually facing a specific direction. Whether now we face towards the Qibla or you face towards Jerusalem is irrelevant. But the prophets used to face a certain direction.
Right.
The fact that the Christians don't seem to understand that, because obviously, like I said, they don't read the Old Testament; they read only the New Testament, and they will tell you, yeah, yes, we've read the Bible, and even that they read it selectively. What they read it selectively. Where they see Jesus there, they will read that. But there is that commonality where we both the prophets and the of Islam, that we face a certain direction when we pray. We don't just pray, we just go anywhere. I'm going to face this way. I'm going to face that way. God had given us a direction to follow. He gave the prophets of old the direction, and he gave the Muslims a direction. This is my
That's
point,
correct.
basically.
Christians are acting. There's another problem for Christians. This is why I work so hard to help them. In that, if you go into a Muslim home and say, "Can I see your Quran?" Every Muslim home that I've ever been to has a Quran in Arabic. Everyone I've ever been to in my life, the Quran they have is in Arabic. Now, they may have a translation for sure, but they have a Quran in Arabic. Anywhere, when I was in Malaysia and Indonesia, it made no difference where. Okay? If you go into a Jewish home, every Jewish home has a Torah in Hebrew. For me, I don't use translations, but some people may have a translation as well. But the point is, we're reading the original. Every Muslim child who's
Yes.
brought up in a religious home is brought up reading the Quran in its original language. I remember during Ramadan in Indonesia that there were young boys who, I don't know how old they were, maybe 5 or 6 years old, who memorized the
Yes.
entire Quran and would recite it
Exactly.
from memory, and it would be on the
My son is one of them as well, who at the age of
table.
18 he
So
memorized the
exactly,
Quran.
but
Yes.
no Christian,
Mhm.
reads the Jewish Bible in Hebrew. They don't read the Jewish Bible. Very
And
rarely did any of them read it.
that's a
But they don't
mockery.
even
That's
read it
a
in the original.
mockery that they make of the
Course.
Muslims, because they say to the Muslims that your God knows only one language. Your God knows only Arabic, and, like, why is your book in Arabic for? Without realizing that the Torah is read in Hebrew, basically.
Yes, but this is a fake argument because these same Christians, see, this is an argument out of hatred for Muslims because
Yeah.
these same Christians say that the Hebrew language is holy. This is really an anti-Muslim statement. This is
Right.
a lie. And I got to explain this. These same Christians, if you ask them, is the Hebrew language holy? They would say yes. And it says so in Tanakh. David, in his Mizmor, in Psalm 33, verse 6, God created the whole world with this language. So they would admit that Hebrew was the language which God used to convey the eternal oracles that they believe in, not in the Christian Bible, but the Hebrew Bible, what they call the Old Testament. So this is, these are the lies that are promulgated against Muslims, not because they
Mhm.
have substance, but because it's just another way of using a blowtorch. And in fact, if you're not familiar with these things, you get yourself in a lot of trouble. As it
Right.
turns out, the problem for Christians is they're not reading any Bible, their own or the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible in its original language. Now, it's true, there are some Christians who take Hebrew and take Greek in their schools. Some of them are very studious, a few, and they might learn it even more. But that's a very, very tiny number of people. I mean,
Right.
the number of Christians who are fluent in Hebrew in the world, you can count on two hands, besides professors at universities. So they
Right.
don't do it. And they don't
Right.
read their Bible in Greek. It's not that they
Right.
can't, but that they're taking out the English translations. They're reading from a King James. And this is what separates us. You have to go back to the original and to a holy tongue. And this is very, very important.
Right. Another thing I'd noticed in some of your videos, when you mention about the birth of Jesus, in some of the I can't remember which one it was, but one time you mentioned that was a completely fabricated story. Now, when you think of it, yeah, 2000 years ago in Judea, a young girl who's supposed to be from a religious family, you know, ends up coming home with a child. Now, obviously, that's not something like what happens in the Bronx of 2021, where there's like, you know, hallelujah, and you know, she's given birth today or whatever. She would have been stoned to death. Yeah. Now, I remember listening to watching one of your shows where you actually mentioned that story is totally invented, basically, like many other stories in the Bible. I mean, think of it logically. You know, a girl, Alma in 2000, 2000 years ago, comes up with a child in her hand. Who's the father? God is the father. You know, and that would have been something very, very strange for them. Obviously, like today, you know, in the Bronx, 11-year-old girl comes in with a child in her hand, and it's a party, basically. So
Look, this happened in
can you
the,
speak about this?
this happened in the news a few times where nuns are pregnant and claim that they were completely chaste and they were thrown out of the convent. I mean, this actually
Yeah.
happens. It happens in the news, and people don't take it seriously. Another point that should be said, and this is the same in Jewish and Islamic law, is if a girl who's not married is pregnant, so she is that's not adultery. It is haram. It is not an appropriate relationship for a girl to have a child outside of wedlock, and a woman should be married, but that is not adultery. Adultery, where one would be subject to the death penalty, is someone who's married and sleeps with another man. That would be a very serious matter. So that distinction in Jewish law is enormous. It means a child of a woman who has just never been married, that child is not illegitimate as a bastard or mamzer in Hebrew. It's only if she was an adulteress or so on and so forth. So there's a very big distinction between the two. But yeah, I mean, look, Muslims are smart enough to know that the text that we find in Matthew chapter 1, verse 23, that where Matthew misquotes the book of Isaiah 7:14, which is talking about an alma, which means a young woman, and you
Young
have
girl. Yeah.
a young woman, and it's young women that have children as opposed to old women. So this is a very so now Muslims believe that that Jesus was born of a virgin, but not because of what Matthew says, not because of Matthew. They know that they're not idiots. The Muslims believe it because it says it in the Quran. The reason why Jews have a problem with Christianity is not the claim of a virgin birth. You know, in the grand scheme of things, for a virgin to conceive, that would be a minor miracle. In fact, that we observe in the world where not in humans, but parthenogenesis actually can happen. I mean, that would be a tiny miracle. So I don't know why people get so excited about that. The key point is what Jewish people resent is that the church has altered the Jewish scriptures in order to make it appear Christological. That text doesn't say that, and Muslims do not subscribe to the book of Matthew, and they'll say, "Oh no, it's Isaiah." No, they don't say that. So what's happened here is that the church has adopted an idea that was alien, misquoted the text in Isaiah, and for that reason, Jewish people were well aware that the Christian Bible was a
But
book filled with
why
corruptions.
why would three pagans come and visit a Jewish child born to a Jewish woman? I mean, do you find anything a little bit strange about that? I mean, I would have expected that. Okay, her being Jewish, it would have been Jewish people who would have been there. Now, the other point that I want to get onto with the same thing: why do Jews then reject Jesus even as a prophet, let alone as a Messiah? You know, the Messiah, like, you know, is a different thing altogether, because the Messiah can be taken in different terms. I have heard Islamic scholars mention that at the time of Moses, he was he was what's the word? He was challenged with magic, with magicians. So he had to prove himself with magic. At the time of Jesus, he was healing people with his hands. So that word Masih, yeah, comes from the word masah, to rub. Okay, so that's what some people had mentioned. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came in a time when poetry was the big thing in Arabia. So obviously the Quran is poetic according to them. The Quran is like, you know, very, the Arabic is different. So according to what some people had mentioned, that Jesus didn't come as a Messiah, the actual Messiah itself. But why do
Just
the
do me a favor.
Jews?
I apologize because I'm losing
Yes.
track. What was your
Okay.
first question? Because I got so involved in your
The
second question. What is let's do that separately. What was the first question?
The first question about Mary basically giving birth to him, and pagans coming to visit. That was
So
something.
why let's address that, because
Yeah.
that's
Right.
completely separate. So we
Right.
find that in Matthew's infancy narrative, Matthew doesn't tell us how many people from the East, Gentiles from the East, we presumably coming from Persia, because they're called Magi. We don't know how many, but whatever the number of people, why, it's a setup. The point of Matthew is to show that here are these Gentiles who came to adore and worship the child. And so the Gentiles, they just love that little kid, and they follow it. They're following a magic star, a star that guides them to Jerusalem, where they encounter Herod the Great, and then they ask of the Jews, where is the Messiah to be born? Completely misquotes Micah 5:2, and then the magic star takes them to Bethlehem, which is about 30 minutes from where I live, just south of here in Judea, and the magic star knows exactly where the house is. Now, why did you have to stop off in Jerusalem? The reason why Matthew makes up the story, which you don't find in Luke, is to make the Jews look as horrible as possible, because here Herod is trying to kill the little kid and therefore have every little boy 2 years and younger executed, and the non-Jews.
But that's not historical, though, is it? I mean, I've read a lot of documents that said that's not historical. I mean, Herod at the time of Herod, there was no killing of little babies. And what about this flee to Egypt? I understand that did not happen as well.
Right. So
I mean, is there any evidence that Jesus actually had? Because I'd read that they didn't even flee to Egypt. Basically, there was no, at the time, there was no census. There was no.
Right. So what we're doing is,
so can you enlighten us on that as well?
We got to unpack all this here.
I'm actually talking of the birth
right, so
narrative
there's no
itself.
census. So
Everything that is in there, like, you know,
so
there's so many things that are in there. Yeah.
The birth narrative of Luke has a census. The birth narrative of Matthew there is no census.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Matthew and Luke are two independent narratives that are completely incompatible. They're actually opposites of each other. What both of them are trying to do independently is get Jesus to be born in Bethlehem. Why? Because King David was born in Bethlehem. See 1 Samuel 17:58. So they want to have Jesus born in the city that King David was born in, but they go about it. Each of them makes up a story that's completely different. And you're correct. The book of Luke uses a census which never happened. Now, it's not that censuses did not go on. but there was no census of the empire where people had to go back to the city from which their ancestors came from 1,000 years ago. If I asked most people, where did your ancestors live 1,000 years ago? Most people wouldn't have even a clue, let alone be able to get there and get there in the ancient world. So this census is completely invented. But the reason why Luke needs the census is he has Mary and Joseph start out in Nazareth and then come to Bethlehem to have the baby because Joseph had to go to the city in which his ancestors were born. And there's no room at the inn, at the hotel, so they stay in a barn. Matthew has a reverse case where the family is from Bethlehem and they have to escape Herod and then have to go down to Egypt. These stories are completely concocted. Christians just never compare the two stories and realize that they're completely reversed. They're completely incompatible. There's no going down to Egypt in Luke, and there's no stars with Magi in Luke. So both of these are just reverse stories. Completely transparent.
Right, because I've watched a few of your videos where you actually mentioned that. Yeah.
Right.
My other contention now is with Paul. Yeah. Actually, you have mentioned several times that you still believe that Paul was a Jew, no matter all these, problems that happens with Paul. I actually follow what Hiram Maccabee says. This guy cannot be a Jew. Yeah. Because actually he changed the scriptures. He's actually wanting to convert Jews who were following the actual laws, the laws of God. He wants to stop them from following the laws, basically. So how could a Jew himself, he claimed that he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He was a student of Gamaliel, and then you being a rabbi, who obviously know about Gamaliel. I mean, would a student of Gamaliel, a Pharisee of Pharisees, actually invent, a man coming to die on the cross,
Right.
for people's sins or whatever? So
So
my
the-
contention is with
yeah.
Paul, but you seem to kind of stop short of saying that this guy is not a Jew. So can you explain that, please?
So I knew Chaim Maccabee, Professor Maccabee, very well personally. He's a dear friend, he's a professor in the United Kingdom, and we used to talk about this. So let's first get what is important straight. On the day of judgment, you don't want to be anywhere near Paul. He was one of the most wicked people in history who destroyed so many souls and brought idolatry to the world, a version, an iteration of idolatry that's most grotesque. And the book you're referring to is The Myth Maker, Paul and the Invention of Christianity.
The
So,
Mythmaker.
Maccabee advanced the idea that Paul was not even Jewish. But the real point is that Paul invented what we now know as Christianity. The claim that Paul was a student of Gamaliel, Paul doesn't even make that claim. And I think most people conflate Acts with Paul's own letters. I mean,
No, but
Paul's
he must have told that to Luke, or given Luke the impression that he was a student of Gamaliel,
no,
or to
Luke
make him,
wrote, whoever wrote Luke,
to make him
whoever-
seem superior than the actual disciples. So
Right.
I'm a student of Gamaliel. I'm a Pharisee of a Pharisee, or whatever. So.
This is a very tricky area because we don't know who wrote Luke, but the question is, did whoever write Luke Acts ever even see Paul's epistles? This is a very complicated thing because Acts and Paul's epistles contradict each other on so many issues. This is one of the biggest, most torturous issues that scholars have to deal with is what exactly the author of the book of Acts see. Paul's indisputed letters, just for a timeline, are all in the 50s, starting with First Thessalonians, ending with Romans. The book of Acts is written 85-90. It's very unlikely that they even met each other. It's possible, but we're talking about a much, much later book. But if the author of Luke Acts really had a conversation with Paul, which I doubt very highly, he would have never contravened his own letters in the book of Acts, which he does constantly. Moreover, Luke Acts' theology, his Christology on atonement is completely different than Paul.
Yes.
Paul advanced the idea that Jesus died for your sins and he was an atonement, a vicarious atonement for your sins. Luke Acts rejects that completely. And therefore, I reject the notion that whoever wrote Luke Acts was studying the letters of Paul as we have it today. And there's no way the two of them could have had a conversation because they are so violently different. Their belief about the Eucharist, you look at Luke 22:19. I don't want to get too complicated. And 1 Corinthians 11:25-26, they don't match each other at all. So I don't believe that they corresponded with
No,
each
but
other.
my point is, in many of your videos that I've watched, you still claim that this guy is a Jew. I mean, a guy
I don't know.
a guy who's
Right.
actually changed the text, a guy who's actually got Jews to stop following the kosher laws.
My dear
I
brother,
wouldn't consider that guy
you're
to
a
be.
very sweet man. You really are. But I've got news for your viewers. The problem is you love us too much. But we have some very wicked Jews. I know this comes as a surprise to people, but we have some Jews who are very wicked, who've turned their backs on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There are Jews like that in history who are our greatest enemy of the Jewish people. Many of them are Jews. Bernie
And Paul is
Sanders
one of them. Paul is one of them. Yeah.
Paul is an enemy of Judaism. Now, to us, it's only one thing is important to us. What is Paul teaching? Is it his ideas consistent with Tanakh, or is it haram? Is it something that is repulsive? The prophets of old all opposed the teachings of Paul. All taught that no one could die for anyone's sin, and the way that God forgives us is through that God is a Rahman. God is merciful, and therefore we pray to God, we repent to God, and we hope. We don't walk around like arrogant Christians saying we know we're going to heaven. No Jew talks that way. It's like when we get on a plane, no one says, I know I'm going to land. We hope the plane is going to land safely. In the same way, when a Jew who really serves the one true God, we live our lives, and if we make a mistake, we turn to God and we confess our sins, we repent of our sins, and then we hope with God's mercy, we have confidence in God's mercy that He will forgive us if it is the will of Hashem. Only God knows the mind. But we don't talk like arrogant Christians. We know this and that. I want to get back to an arrogant Jew, maybe. Maccabi Elder wasn't. The point that Paul is doing constantly and very famously in Galatians 1 and 2, very famously in Philippians 3, is that he's claiming that he was a Pharisee, that he was the smartest boy in the class. And in fact, he demeans the other apostles, referring to them in Galatians as the so-called pillars of the church, referring to Peter in Galatians chapter 2 as someone who's a hypocrite, who he stood up to his face. Paul is trying to show he is superior to anyone else. So you could tell this is not made up. I mean, there are things we could speculate about. Was Paul Jewish or not Jewish? One thing you can be sure of, he didn't get along with anybody who was Christian. Why? Because it's embarrassing. You're never going to make that up. That means Paul wouldn't travel with John Mark. He couldn't get along with Barnabas. Paul was someone who was constantly fighting with fellow Christians. With Peter, no one would make this up because this is what's called the criteria of embarrassment. This is the most rigorous method to know if something is authentic in the ancient world. No one's going to make up that Paul got into fights with everybody if it didn't happen. Like, why would you introduce something so embarrassing? So what we know about him is he's one of these characters that just got along with no one, fighting with everybody. And the only people he got along with were the women that were surrounding him, his female companions that were around him all the time. But he was fighting with everybody.
You do mention in one of your one or two of your videos that I just watched one recently, I think about a week ago, where you mentioned the actual crucifixion that didn't happen. That has been invented as well. Are you trying to say that the actual birth and death of Jesus is invented, or are you trying to say that it's not the Jews who killed Jesus? Because according to the Talmud, he was stoned to death. He was not crucified. And in your video that I watched, you mentioned that the crucifixion was an actual made-up story. Now, can you?
Gosh. Oh, yeah. So the crucifixion story that we find in the Gospels is completely made up. It's just loaded with nonsense. So we got to sort of parse this all out. That means it's called a plot device. The things that they are putting in the story to. Like, why would women come back to the tomb Sunday morning to find an empty tomb? Okay,
I
so they
think
all
I
got
think
to
I
solve
actually
this.
I think I actually text you. I sent you an email about this
Yeah,
one
so
time.
this is a very.
Whether
I
it
mean,
was whether it was halal for a woman to enter a man's tomb.
oh, this
I
is
think I
all
emailed you about that. You
it's
remember that?
all ridiculous. So
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
do, first of all, when a body is prepared for burial, we want when someone dies, we want to bury the person immediately, as quickly as possible. And this is the most important thing. There are many rituals and prayers that we say when burying someone, but the most important thing is to bury as quickly as possible. This is the same law. This is Sharia in Islamic law. This is halakha, which means the same thing in Jewish law. Bury the body as quickly as possible. That's the most important thing. There are other customs and prayers that are said, but this is the most critical thing. Now, why, if someone is buried on Friday, why would anybody go back to a grave on Sunday? You got to, because no one who goes back to the grave on Sunday. That's ridiculous. Now, here is where this story becomes naked. So, what happens is Mark and Luke, for example, want to convey that they want to prepare the body with spices and anoint them with oil. Now, it's true that when someone dies, immediately men care for the body of a male deceased, wash it with water, and then cover it in a shroud. But a woman would never do that for a man's body, and women would only care for a deceased woman's body. It's the same thing in Islam. No man would ever care for a deceased woman when burying her. That is completely disrespectful. So that's what we were talking about. By the way, just for your viewers to know, the word Sharia in Arabic doesn't really mean law. It really means the path, the proper path. And as it turns out, its correlating term, halacha, that noun also means the path. It doesn't really mean law. Now, what's with spices? Why was spices ever used for the season? This is where we catch the writers of the New Testament red-handed as liars. Because why would you ever put spices of any kind with a dead body? Where is that in the Bible? That means where is there a commandment to put spices with the body? So there isn't a commandment like that. So where does this come from? So actually there is some, the lies that are most dangerous, the ones that have a little bit of truth. So what happened was that when a person dies, the body begins to decay immediately. And if you're living in a world without refrigeration in a hot place, it can cause a foul smell. And this is, of course, a disgrace to the deceased. So there was a tradition that we don't want that there should be any dishonor to the deceased. So spices were put with the body, they were burnt. This was a whole technique that was used. And the only purpose of it is when you're taking the body to the grave and burying it. So let's say a person dies in the morning. By the time the body's prepared and ready for burial, it might be in the afternoon. It could be that night. You don't know, but if it's hot outside, it can be a tremendous disgrace. So they would have spices, which they were experts in preparing, that would completely would cover any possible foul odor that would be considered a bizayon hames, a disgrace to the dead. This is all simple, okay? Here's
Right.
how stupid this story goes in the book of Mark and in the book of Luke. And I would urge you to go to Mark chapter 16, verse 1, go to Luke chapter 24, verse 1, and this is where it really, I would cry if I didn't want to laugh. I don't know which to do. So what it tells us there is that the women actually went to the tomb in order to anoint the body and to add spices and to open the grave. Why
No, but
would you add?
my point is then that whole crucifixion story didn't happen then, because
The whole
Christians claim that
crucifixion story.
the Christians mention that they have witnesses, they have historical witnesses, they have whatever, and like I said, the Talmud mentions that he was actually stoned. Can you actually mention? I mean,
Yeah, that's tricky. So I want to just parse it. By the way,
right.
you ask great questions. You're really good. There are no softballs from you. So as it turns out, this is an issue of disagreement, meaning that in the Talmud, the Yeshu in the Talmud does not live during the time of Jesus. So it's not the
Right.
same person. The person that we find who is stoned is someone who is a contemporary of Yeshua ben Parachia, and would date back to the 1st century BCE. It's not the same individual. So and this is an issue that scholars argue over there. Well, was it really that or not that? So it's
Right.
very, very tricky to know if this is the same person, because the Talmud doesn't date it to then at all. So therefore it's not straightforward that this is the same person, because Rabbi Shimon ben Parachia, Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, excuse me, lived 100 BCE, and that he would have been a contemporary of that person who's executed, not in the first
Right.
century. In the 1st century, Jews weren't executing anyone. By that time, by the 1st century, Jews stopped carrying out the capital punishment. So therefore, I can't give
But
you an easy answer.
there were a lot of crucifixions during that time, because I remember reading Josephus, and he mentions that, like, the story that is in Luke, I think, is actually borrowed from Josephus, where he mentions that he was traveling back and he found 3 people being crucified, and one of them was his friend, and he went up and asked for his body and everything.
Oh yeah.
So
Look,
there were crucifixions at the time.
Absolutely. It was a banality. It was ubiquitous to see people crucified all over Jerusalem. The Romans did this to people who they thought were a threat to the empire. You're only crucified. It was a very expensive process to do this. The estimate is, there's an estimate, is that roughly 200,000 Jews were crucified during the 1st century. And you're right, Josephus describes seeing his friends on a cross. Jerusalem has very temperate weather. I mean, the weather is just like, for 8 months out of the year, it's like 23 degrees Celsius.
Sorry to cut you. The reason why I'm really interested in the crucifixion, because I've written a book about it, and I'm hopefully going to be releasing this book soon. So I'm trying to get as much juice from you as I can.
I'm giving it to you right now. Here's the very critical point. When people were executed by crucifixion, they didn't die right away. They rather were naked on a stake for usually like a week. It depends on how strong they were, and eventually they died. But Jerusalem is not like Qatar or Saudi Arabia, where it's brutally hot. There are a few weeks where it's really hot. We call it in Hebrew or in Arabic a khamsin, or there are some cold months. But Passover, this time of the year, it's gorgeous. I mean, a healthy adult could be outside. It's just nice all the time. So therefore, the story is completely created. They had to figure out a way how to get him dead so quickly. But these stories are completely invented in order to have a resurrection story. And I explained that there's no doubt in my mind that Mary Magdalene is the person who invented the whole story. And that's based on the fact that she is only mentioned 12 times in the Gospels, but 11 of those 12 times she's mentioned in association with Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection. And what you have is enormous contradictions in the Gospels of which women are present at the tomb. The one thing they don't disagree about, it's Mary Magdalene. She's always front and center. In fact, in the book of John, chapter 20, she's the only one there. And I realized this back when I was in Indonesia, when I saw these other pastors who died and all these women. It was, if you're a woman, please don't be offended. But, I've seen this happen in the Far East where some great revered person dies and it's unexpected, and it's women that meet the Virgin Mary. It's women that say their pastor came to them. And that's what happened, no doubt. And the hint is in Luke chapter 8, Mary Magdalene, the only time she's mentioned outside of the Passion narratives, she's told that Jesus took out from her devils, which means that she was mentally ill. I mean, that people in the ancient world didn't understand what mental illness is, and to them they had to cast out devils in this way. So I think that's what really occurred.
My point is, in your last video that I watched, you mentioned that it wasn't the Jews who killed him. Are you trying to say, because Paul actually says it's the Jews who killed him,
First
who killed Jesus?
2.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it wasn't the Jews. Now in the Quran it makes it clearly neither did they kill him, nor was he crucified.
157, right?
Yeah. So the Quran is clear about this, and now you have mentioned as well that
this never happened.
This never happened. Now
never
some
happened.
people say that Quran is alluding to that the Jews didn't kill him, but other people killed him.
Oh, no,
You
no,
see,
no,
so
no.
that's
Just read,
so
it's Surah 4, Ayah 157.
because
It's
even the
right.
Christians would say the Romans killed him. You
The
see,
point
so
of that, of that text in the Quran is that he didn't die. That's the point.
exactly.
That means it could be a question that there are scholars that discuss in the Islamic tafsir discuss exactly what was meant. It was made to look that way, and that is an issue that scholars could examine. What is not up for grabs, what is indisputed, is from that passage that Jesus never died, but it appeared that way. But the point is, he never was killed. The word in Arabic and the word in Hebrew and Aramaic, it happens to be the same word. It's identical word. He was never
So you
killed.
agree? So you agree?
Oh,
The
yeah.
crucifixion never happened.
That the Jews would never want the Romans to crucify anybody. The
Right.
Jews were at
Right.
war with the
Okay.
Romans. The Jews were at war with the Romans, and the Jews had so many problems of their own because one fellow is running around. Now we got to just do this. If we're going to go with the Christian idea that Jesus is going around and the Jews were unhappy with he's the least of their problems. The problems that the Jews had was from the Roman Empire and fighting between one Jew and another Jew. That would have been the least of their issues.
Mm-hmm. Right. The fact is, Jesus was not new among the Jews there. I mean, he was born there, he was raised there, and they knew him obviously. So he's not like somebody just turned up and he committed whatever and we're going to have him crucified or whatever. From his birth, they knew him, and this is why I was questioning this issue of why even as a prophet the Jews they did not even recognize him, let alone the Messiah. For that question that I asked you earlier on.
Let me answer you really
that
very
prophet itself, because Islam we believe he was a prophet, just a mere prophet, even.
Right, I got it. I understand, and Muslims believe he wasn't just a prophet, but a Rasul, and brought a Sharia. I understand that all. And for your viewers, Rasul means a high order of prophet that has a special message, and I understand that. So it's very important for my dear cousins to understand this, so you understand the Jewish brain. Okay, I have never in my life heard a Jew having conversation. Well, what do you think about Jesus according to the Islamic view of Jesus? We don't have those conversations. But if some Jew in the first century came and told Jews you should keep the Torah and return back, we wouldn't have a problem with that. I'm not saying it's part of our tradition that he is a prophet in any way, but this just is not in our universe. In our universe, when Jews hear the word Jesus, all we're thinking about is the Christian Jesus. For us, if somebody came and said you should keep the Torah, that's great. That would not make him a prophet any more than someone else who did that in Jewish view. But I want to be frank with my Muslim viewers, and that is that Jews really don't think about. We don't think about a Messiah as Jesus as a prophet as it is in Islam. And the problem is, one point is that in Judaism, in Christianity, and Islam, we're using the same terms, but we don't mean the same things. And that's where you get into a lot of trouble. So Christianity uses the word Messiah, Jews use the word Messiah, Muslims use the term Messiah. Muslims, as an example, don't have a tradition that Jesus was a descendant of King David. That's not a part of it, because the Muslims understand that the way you know what tribe you're from is according to your father, not according to your mother. So I don't want to get this more complicated than it needs to be, but this is an issue that Muslim scholars have discussed extensively, is in what way was Jesus a Mashiach? Mashiach comes from the word anointed. And there's the general consensus of Tabari and so on is that he was anointed as a priestly anointing. But that's a Islamic thing, but it's not Ben David in Islam. So I want to caution the viewers that if you're not really intimately familiar with this, you're going to find yourself spinning your wheels, because we're all using the same language, but we really mean something really quite different.
Right. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention about is a lot of the Christians, they tend to taunt Muslims on issues that are parallel in Judaism. I mean, polygamy was something that was not started by Islam. The marriage of in Judaism and in Islam as well. At the time, girls matured early. I mean, even Mary, according to what I read in the Talmud, she was between 10 and 11 years old when she was married, and that was the laws of the Jewish laws. A boy at the age of 12, he does his bar mitzvah. You see, so they tend to mature at a certain age, but Christians tend to look at that as something taboo, like, polygamy is taboo and Muslims are to blame for it, and
So
like,
we're conflating two issues here. So let's talk about polygamy.
I'm talking of the issue of the commonalities between Islam and Judaism,
Jews, right.
whereby Christians look only to Islam and blame them on that, like, polygamy and marriage of a young girl or whatever. But they tend to overlook that is the same thing that's happening in the Bible. If you open their Bible, they will see these same things happening.
So this comes from, let me explain. All this stuff, we're attacking Islam and attacking Muhammad, and specifically sexually attacking him, was invented by a Christian. His name is Saint John of Damascus. Okay, he lived like 200 years after Muhammad. Okay, so, and he was someone who was very, very familiar with the Islamic world, from Damascus, which eventually became a part of the Islamic world. So that's where those attacks come from. This is not like this is out of nowhere. It's that Christian polemicists went after Islam in this way. Now, polygamy is still practiced by Jews who are from Yemen. Really not very much, but from Yemen alone. We, in the general Jewish world, certainly in the Ashkenazi world, being Jews from Europe, we banned the practice only 1,000 years ago, in the year 1000, so literally 1,021 years ago. And the reason had nothing to do with the prohibition of polygamy, but it had to do with the problem that a man could be in many countries, have children with different wives, and those children could wind up marrying each other, and then you've got a very, very, very serious problem. It had nothing to do with it. The prophets were...
so it was nothing scriptural that actually banned it then?
No. The problem was really, let me just make this very simple. The reason why Jews came to ban the practice, not all, as I said, Yemenite Jewry, your wife is from Yemen, so Yemenite Jews practice polygamy into the modern age. I mean, the problem was the following. Imagine a man who has a wife in the Holy Land, here in Eretz Yisrael. He has another wife in Yemen. He has a wife in Indonesia, and he's running the spy. He's a trader, so he's traveling, spending months in one place and months in another city, right? And that's how he does business. And he has a family in each one of these countries. Now, what happens when those children grow up and don't know each other? And if they don't know each other, what happens if they travel and meet their own brother or sister and they don't even know it? You could see where this can go. This can be a disaster. So it's not the intrinsic problem of polygamy. It's the problem that is the ancillary problem that is associated with it. But I should say, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, that outside of the world of Yemen, outside of, I remember in Indonesia, as a rabbi, I had people who came with 2 wives for marital counseling, and that was very strange to me. I confess to you, it was a very odd thing to sit there with a man and his 2 wives and try to help them through the marriages. Rabbis sometimes are called on to do. It just happens. But it's true that in the West, it's weird as crazy, and women would have no part of it, and because it's just a different model. But in the ancient world, if a woman didn't have a husband, if she didn't have a family, she was finished. A woman's only protection was her brothers and her father, and that was it. And if she didn't have that, she couldn't go out and get a job and get an apartment. She was dead. The only thing that protected you was your family. It was your clan. It was your tribe. That was it. That was what protected you. If you didn't have that, you were dead. You were finished. And therefore, women would join pre-existing families to have the protection of the family. And this was a practice that was all over Tanakh.
Okay. I think this is going to have to be the last question because, time is going past. I didn't realize time is going past. Yeah. When they spoke to John the Baptist and they asked him, "Are you the Christ? Are you Elijah? Or are you that prophet?" Who actually is that prophet? Are you still waiting for, that prophet? The book of John.
Right. So are you asking me, Rabbi Singer,
Yeah.
who am I waiting for?
No. Who are the
You're
Jews
asking
waiting
me,
for?
who are they asking? Are you that prophet?
Yes.
That's an issue of great discussion. There are many people who believe that
I asked one Christian.
prophet is a
That
reference to
question.
Deuteronomy 18.
I
Okay.
asked one Christian that question. It took him 2 weeks to answer me, and when he did answer me, he said to me it was the Christ. But John the
Well, I'm
Baptist
surprised it
had
took
already
him
but he'd already denied that he was the Christ in the first in the first verse, and I
right.
kept on pasting that and copying that to him and saying, "Look, he's already denied he was the Christ," and it took him 2 weeks, and he still came back and said to me it was the Christ. So, what is your take on that?
Well, there's no issue here because the books just contradict each other. The Gospels themselves contradict each other, whether John the Baptist was Elijah or not Elijah. And John, he says, I'm not. Matthew, he is. So you have to understand that to ask a question from one book to another is, I'm saying it's ridiculous. So in the book of Acts, Jesus is considered the prophet of Deuteronomy chapter 18. So therefore, that's who therefore they will reference are you the prophet who we're waiting for, meaning the Christ, who is the reference to in Deuteronomy chapter 18, which Muslims will be very familiar with that chapter. That is probably what is in mind in that text.
Okay, and what is your take on Isaiah 42 then? Who's actually been spoken about that? Just
The
quickly,
servant,
because I know.
the servant
Yeah.
Israel. It's a covenant servant.
Yeah, but when it talks of the area, the children of Kedar and everything, I mean, who is that actually referring to?
Yeah, so Jewish people, as you know, long before Islam, with the capital, I was there, the Arabian Peninsula was filled with the Jewish people.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Why were they there?
Well, Jewish people were all over. They were there as traders. They lived there. Jewish people living in the Arabian Peninsula for thousands of years. Yemenite Jews were living in Arabia, on the tip of Arabia, for 2,500 years from the destruction of the first temple. So they were there for a very, 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 very long time. And that's why they're very prominent in Islamic literature, because they were everywhere. Then they played a very important role in that region of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the because it was actually the scholars of Judaism who actually understood their text. It wasn't the layman who, he didn't understand the text, but the scholars had actually understood their text, and it brought them there. Wasn't it because they were waiting for another prophet, for that prophet, the one that had been questioned?
So we don't have literature like this. There are people who write books about this, but it's not in the primary text. But Jews were carried off to Babylon. I mean, it's not like why are Jews in Australia? It's why are Jews in the very area where Jews were exiled to after the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonian Empire. So to find Jewish people in Mesopotamia, in Arabia, is not like you found them in New York.
But we have the layman Jew, but we have the actual learned Jews who are in certain parts of the world, and they are wherever they were, they knew their texts, and a lot of them knew Isaiah 42, and those who were in Medina must have had a specific reason for being there, isn't it?
I could only tell you that this was a flourishing city. It was a place of enormous trade. I mean, I'm not going to tell you anything that you need a rabbi to answer for you. I mean, these are not little places no one ever heard of. These were centers of commerce and trade, and major Jewish communities existed in both Mecca and Medina. We know this from all sources all around. And why would they be there? This is a place of enormous trade. I mean, in Mecca was a place of enormous trade. It was also a place of enormous idolatry before Islam, before Muhammad. So it was a place of trade. We all know that.
We've reached our time, but would you mind if we take some questions for 5-10 minutes or whatever? Is that okay?
Sure.
We had agreed 1.5 hours, but we'd gone over our time.
We'll take a couple of questions. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so if I put if I post the link in the what's the name here in the chat, and if anybody has any questions or whatever, and if they want to come in, and but please, the questions to the points that we've been speaking about tonight, and keep it. We've had a nice discussion, and I hope that the rabbi will, after Ramadan sometime, maybe I'll call on him again to join us again for a specific, maybe I'll choose a specific subject, and maybe we can talk about that again. Yeah, so if there's anybody who's got I've posted the what's the name there in the link. I've posted the link there. 1 second. Yeah. Okay, just a minute. I think Anas, if he's listening to me, he knows StreamYard better. So I think I have a question here. It says here, why does Maimonides admit that Muhammad is the camel rider in Isaiah 21?
I need to know the source of where Maimonides.
Rambam, isn't it?
Maimonides, I know Rambam. Yeah. Maimonides wrote. I need to know what is the source for that quote.
Right. Okay. He doesn't give the source, but he mentions here that
I never heard of that in my life. So.
Right. Okay. If there are any other questions, we can. Okay. We have MK Dawa who's here. So MK is someone who I know already, and right. Let me just bring him in. Right. MK. Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah. Sorry. I muted you by mistake. Go ahead.
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh. I hope you're well, inshallah.
Good to hear from you. Huh?
Allah bless you, bro. Allah bless you.
It's my launch today, and some of the stuff I didn't know what I was doing, so to bring you guys in and everything. So if you can just quickly ask the rabbi the question, and because he accepted.
Yeah, I want to thank the rabbi for that very interesting discussion.
He agreed on 1.5 hours, and we just went over the limit a bit. So.
Yeah, so it'll be just quick. Of course, you've been asked this so much about Deuteronomy 18:18. I want to ask you about that in light of Deuteronomy 34:10. That prophet is not Joshua or another prophet from Israel. Obviously, you can bring up Isaiah 42. I don't want to go like in talking about manuscripts and how something has been changed. From Ahmed to my servant. I don't want to go into all these things. It's just direct question about Isaiah, about the Deuteronomy 18:18 in light of Deuteronomy 34:10 and 33:2 regarding Prophet Muhammad. He's coming from Kedar, coming from Mecca.
Sure. Let me address that directly. So Deuteronomy 34:10, like come navi oid bi Yisrael k'Moshe. There was no prophet ever like Moses. What does that mean? The text continues, Asher Yadu Hashem ponim el ponim, that knew God face to face. So what is being conveyed in Deuteronomy 34? It's not telling us that there's no other prophet besides Moses of blessed memory. There were many, many prophets. Abraham was a prophet. Yoshua ben Nun was a prophet. There were many, many, many prophets. But the Deuteronomy 34 is a modifier to say that Moses had the highest level of prophecy. And what that means is that when Moses spoke to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be his name, he was completely conscious and he spoke directly to God, not through an angel. So Deuteronomy 34 is telling us that there's 0 people in the world ever that will ever be like Moses on the level of prophecy that he had. Deuteronomy 18 is telling us as a prophet like Moses, in that, not like that he'll speak to God face to face, but like Moses, who will carry on the prophecy and tradition, because of course Moses dies before the Banu Yisrael passed through the Jordan. So 34:10 is the level of prophecy. And in fact, an Islamic view is that Moses, while not being the seal of the prophets in Islam, he had the highest level of prophecy, and that he spoke to God directly without an angel in between. That's all.
With all due respect, Rabbi, this is not entirely correct, because a lot of prophets, they spoke to God directly. For example, in the Isra and Mi'raj, in the Ascension, Prophet Muhammad he spoke to God directly. There are other.
I want to explain this. So that's correct. So we can go with that. You're right. So let's
Yeah.
play that down. I didn't want to get too deep into this. So of
Sure.
course, God appeared to many, many prophets. Not Moses is not the only one. But when a prophet received prophecy directly from God, he
Yeah.
went into some sort of unconscious state. And that's why when God is speaking to Aaron and Miriam, brother and sister of Moses of blessed memory, he said to them that no one has that level like Moses did. But others did, but they had to go into a sleep, or they were able to see the prophecy through some sort of dimion, through some sort of parallelism. The level that Moses had of intimacy with God, in that God told him every word, while Moses was in a complete state of consciousness and spoke to him. And that's the term that's used. God, Moses spoke to God, upon him as a man speaks to his friend. As a man speaks, what does that mean? It means that they were both conscious. So it is true. You're absolutely correct. God bless you. So there were prophets who only received their prophecy through angels. Daniel,
Yeah.
Zechariah. So there are different levels. Take Samuel, Shmuel Hanavi of blessed memory. He was a great prophet. But when did he receive his prophecy? Very famously, in the beginning of Samuel, he went to sleep and he heard God speak to him. He went running to Eli, the priest, and said, "What's going on?" He said, "Go back to sleep. God is speaking to you." So just the level of consciousness that Moses was at is at the highest level. And that's why in Judaism, Moses is considered the highest regard. In fact, it's a fundamental principle of our faith as a Jew that Moses was the highest prophet of all prophets, and not one letter. One caveat, please, and that is there's only an exception. That is the last 8 verses of the Torah were written by Joshua, not written by Moses. With the exception of those last 8 passages, it was all written by Moses, of blessed memory, according to what God told him. So you're right.
Yeah.
I try to keep it simple on air.
Yeah, I know, but but if you're saying that if Moses has the highest, this highest level, right? If a prophet is to come, then Deuteronomy 18:18 says, "I will raise up a prophet like you." So if there is a prophet to come, then he will be equal to that level of Moses.
Right, but in what way will he be equal? You're right. You're bringing up this is the money. So in what way is he equal? Right,
Okay, so
exactly. So right. That's the point. So we have to define. We need a modification. In what way? Well, if we look at the Bible, we see that the people of Israel followed Joshua in the way that they followed Moses. Joshua chapter 4, verse 14. So it can mean the point is it can mean many things. The key is Yehoshua ben Nun. Muslims would recognize that term more than even Joshua. Yehoshua ben Nun was the person who was the direct prophet who assisted. He was, in fact, according to Islamic tradition, he was the lad mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, the 18th surah, in the Surah of the cave where they meet this mysterious figure. So Yehoshua ben Nun was the person who continues the chain, the continuation of prophets, and leads the children of Israel. It was Moses who laid hand and gave smicha on Moses. So therefore, the text literally, if you read the opening of Joshua, it says, "And the Jews followed Joshua in the way that they followed Moses." It doesn't mean that they were on the same level of prophets. So these are different modifications.
So Joshua is not the prophet of 1818.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes.
Okay,
that's correct.
Okay, if I just might ask a direct question, what is stopping you from accepting Prophet Muhammad as a true prophet of God?
So let's do this. And this is something I said earlier. It's Muslims know me for many, many years, and I've defended Muslims from attacks from Christians more than I don't think any other person alive, any other Jew alive on this planet. But one thing that's important to me is that whatever I talk about has to have a purpose, has to be, has to have a goal. And it is not our tradition as Jews to ever say anything that is offensive to Muslims. That's just the way it is. That's our tradition. You will not find in Jewish literature any attack on Islam with one exception. And that is that we're crazy Muslims and we all have our nut jobs. For instance, you had in the 12th century, you had the Almohad. Okay, they were nuts, and they believed that the status of the Jews as al-Katab, a nation of the book, has ended after 500 years. And they started killing Jews, okay? So if you want to find Jewish people who had bad things to say about Islam, find them around ISIS, find them around the crazies, and then do what Jews would say anything, okay? So therefore, I need to say to my cousins very carefully, it is our tradition, and please respect that we do not in any way say something disrespectful to Muslims. We regard
no, I'm not. And
therefore,
sir, I know that you're respectful.
I know,
I
sweetheart.
know.
So therefore, please.
That's
please.
the reason why I
the
invited
question-
the rabbi
I
on,
know,
actually,
I know,
because I know he's very respectful,
know.
and I respect him a lot as well.
It is, please, I only ask this. I only ask this of my cousins, that please understand that we will not, a Jew is not going to insult the religion of Islam. We're not going to. By saying I know how important Muhammad is to a Muslim. I understand, I studied the Sunnah. I understand that a Muslim takes Muhammad so seriously that he's the greatest of all prophets, he's the seal of the prophets, and actually how he behaved is a model of how a Muslim should behave, how he should dress, how he should carry himself. There are Muslims that don't eat shellfish because there's no record of Muhammad eating shellfish. So I understand how my cousins feel, and I love my cousins. They're my family, my flesh and blood, and the last thing that's going to happen from this Jew is to say anything that's insulting to a Muslim. Now, there are times when Muslims have disagreements among themselves about different issues, about the text, the Torah, and so on. And I may say that I agree with Al-Tabri. Imam Al-Tabri was a great genius. I generally would agree with his tafsir than other tafsirs. I could say that, but I need every Muslim to know this. If you want me to explain anything that would be hurtful to a Muslim and produces nothing, because we believe that Muslims are worshiping the one true God, you come to the wrong guy, you've come to the wrong person. So I'm not going to do that. Right. It happens to be that I'm going to say something else. I'm going to say something else that's going to be a little provocative if you want provocative. Okay? Do you want to? I'll give you one last thing. If you want, I'll say something that won't hurt anyone's feelings. But
no.
I think we'll have to.
Yeah, it's just my question was I was just saying, like, like you honorably say that you defend the Muslims. I was looking also like honorably to defend you from something in the internal abode of something that may harm you. Since you have this knowledge, I would invite you to the.
In our view, so this is important. In our view, this is great. We're going to do this. Don't touch this channel. So this is so interesting. Okay, nobody touch a channel, nobody move. I'm going to say something that's I've never said publicly. So there's a disagreement among Muslims whether a Jew like me, a religious Jew, actually goes to Jannah, actually has paradise or not. Okay, there's a disagreement based on a passage in Surah Al-Baqarah and others. Okay, there's a disagreement. Okay. So therefore, some Muslims who think that Jews can't go to paradise might say, well, we got to perform dawah, an introduction. We have to help the Jews to save them from Gehenna. I get that, okay? So that's the Muslim view, and there's a disagreement about that. My respect, it's not my religion. We're very, very close, but I respect and understand that. I get it. But you need to understand, I say to the Muslim, we're family, right? And family can talk, so we're going to have this conversation. We don't share that disagreement, meaning we believe that a person who worships the one true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and believes in Moses, alayhi salam, believes in Moses of blessed memory, and follows the Torah, that person has a place in the world to come. So you can understand that, put yourself in the mind of a Jew. From our standpoint, there is no reason whatsoever to take a Muslim and take him away from his religion or cause him to doubt anything. And I'm going to say this to you. I'm going to say this, and I never said this public, and I will say it now, and many of you know this. There are I'm not sure of this, but there are probably very few Islamic leaders in the world that have saved more Muslims from apostasy than me, leaving their religion. And you out there who know me personally and have come to me know this. So I say this with all the love of my heart. I'm a public figure, and that comes with a responsibility. There is right now a really big problem between Muslims and Jews for political reasons. And it's a problem. It's a real problem. And
Yeah.
there is any Jew who goes around attacking Islam in any way is being sick in the head. You're throwing gasoline on a fire. How dare you do that right now when Jews and Muslims are going through a challenging time? It's not your sons and daughters that are dying on a battlefield. Now, as it turns out, my doctor is a Muslim, my pharmacist is a Muslim. 70% of pharmacists in Israel are Muslims, are Arabs. They're not all Muslims. But so, therefore, from our vantage point, there is zero reason to tell a Muslim why he should not belong to his religion. Zero. And that's why I don't ever do that. I don't want to do that. And I'm very clear with everyone, I will not engage in that. Now, is there within Islam different views of the content of the text and integrity? Yeah, I'll say, look, I agree with this tafsir and I disagree with that scholar. I disagree with Ibn Hazm and I agree with Imam al-Tabari. I'll tell you
I think
that.
this is why I didn't
I'll
ask you any. This is why I didn't ask you any questions about Ibn
Right.
Hazm and Tabari or
Right.
whatever, because
So
I know it's not your field, it's not your territory.
It's my territory. I've studied both of them extensively.
Yeah, but I mean, you're a Jewish scholar and New Testament scholar.
Obviously, right. So therefore, obviously, when you have, if you can ask the question of Imam al-Tabari, what. This is a Persian Muslim. He actually was a Sunni Persian Muslim, a genius, absolute genius. Man lived to 86 years old. He wrote so much he couldn't even copy it all. So his iteration of the text and so on and so forth is much closer to us than Ibn Hazm, who I disagree with. I've read both of them. I've studied both of them. But that's not what you're asking me. So I would only say that there are certain views that are closer to Judaism and other views that are different. That's all. But we don't have any reason in the world to in any way cause a Muslim to doubt his faith or to be disrespectful. It's about respect. Yeah. And you know what? Muslims show me respect. They show me a lot of love and a lot of respect. And that's how Jews behave around Muslims. And maybe that's why we got along so well for so long, because there's a mutual respect between us. And I want to say one other crazy thing, insane thing. This is going to be insane when I'm going to tell you. I was thinking about it today. You know, one of the reasons why Jews and Muslims love to get involved in these little things about Isaiah chapter 42, it's not really quoted in the Quran, is because we're so similar that we're so sensitive to any difference. Like, you don't have these conversations with Hindus. Why? Because it's a completely different religion. With Buddhists, but with Jews, wow, the Jews are true worship of true Tawheed. So I think I want my Muslim cousins to be aware of this, that it's because of our sameness and because of the mutual respect that causes us to have like a family between brothers going, but how come you go like this and not like this? And I see Muslims doing it also because there are different views of how you do salat and so on. How come like this? How come like that? It's our sameness. It's our family relationship that causes us to be so intrigued by our differences.
Right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, thank you very much, MK, and
thank you, dear brother.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope you recorded that because that was a knockout.
And I have to say
this to you. Does that all make sense to everybody here? Does that make sense to you? What I just said? Does it make sense? Do you understand?
Yeah.
Good.
To me or.
No, MK.
That means, do you understand at least what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm not saying agree, but do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I do, but I don't believe like my primary question was answered. But yeah, maybe next time.
Can we cut it short, because we had agreed, me and the rabbi, to make it to 1.5 hours only, and we've gone over that. And I respect the rabbi a lot, and I follow a lot of his videos and everything, and I have great respect for him because of the way he defends Muslims and everything. So, I mean, it's better if we stick to his agreement as well. And I'm very honored to have had him on the show. I mean, one thing that I like about this guy is his sense of humor, because whenever I listen to his lectures and everything, or his talks, he's always got a great sense of humor. And this is the reason that why I always listen to, I always watch his shows and everything. And he's got a lot of knowledge, and it's such a great honor for me, Rabbi, to have had you on the show. I mean, I had explained to you I was moving house and I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to make it. My eyes were not well, and in the end, alhamdulillah, I managed to make it, and it's given me great pleasure to have had you on the show. And I hope that after Ramadan that I can contact you again, and we can keep in touch with email, because anytime I have any issues, I'm emailing you or sending you a message or whatever. And I hope we can keep this connection and this respect that we have for each other as well. And I hope that other Muslims as well can take this as an education, a discussion of education that we've had. We've actually educated, like, we've learned a lot from you today. And I hope that we can do it again some other time.
And I wish you and all your Muslims a Ramadan Mubarak. You should have really a very special time. Thank you so much for having me on as your first guest, which is a very big honor. And I thank you for
that. It's a great honor for me to have, I launched my channel, and I contacted a few other people. They were not available. You just straight away accepted my invitation, and that was a great honor for me. I was very happy with that, Right.
Thank you.
And especially, I just moved 2 days ago. I moved to a new house, and I've managed to set everything up behind me, as you can see, my library and everything. I was telling you that I was going to be setting up my library and everything. So, so it's a great honor, actually. And thank you very much. And thank you very much for everybody who actually watched the show. And we'll do it again some other time.
If you watched the show, you had a great ride. You didn't.
Thank you very much.
You didn't get bored.
And keep up that sense of humor, because I laugh a lot when I watch you on Tanakh Talk. And please convey my regards to William, where he does a very great show, and keep it up.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Salam.